Picture this, an HOA queen throws a massive party on your land, and just when you think things can't get crazier, your legally bred wolves make a jaw-dropping appearance. It was a bright Saturday morning when I woke to the sound of birds chirping and a distant hum of activity that I couldn't quite place. Little did I know that today, my quiet patch of land, nestled on the edge of a sleepy town, was about to become the epicenter of an HOA drama that would leave everyone talking for months. You see, I've always been proud of my 45-acre property, a place where my family's history is etched into every furrowed field and where I've built something truly unique, a legal, licensed breeding program for wolves in partnership with the state's wildlife board. Yes, you heard that right, a breeding pair of wolves as majestic as they are well-regulated. Now, let me rewind just a bit. I had moved to this land right after college, chasing the dream of living close to nature, away from the bustle of city life. Over the years, I turned a patch of wild acreage into a sanctuary, a blend of open pastures, a small barn renovated into a workshop, and a fenced area that housed my prized pair of wolves. The wolves weren't just for show, they were part of a conservation project that I took great pride in, complete with all the legal permits and safety measures you can imagine. Life was calm, almost idyllic, until the day that everything changed. I had barely finished my morning coffee when I noticed something off in the distance near the eastern boundary of my property. A large, makeshift picnic setup had appeared where I'd always maintained a strict, no trespassing policy, especially over the delicate underground water lines that ran just beneath the surface. At first, I thought it might be a misunderstanding, but as I walked closer, I could see more clearly: folding tables, colorful banners, and an unmistakable flurry of activity. 50 or so people were gathered, laughing, chatting, and feasting on ribs and salads under the benign gaze of a smiling woman adorned with a birthday queen sash. That woman was none other than Karen, the notorious HOA enforcer who had been prancing around our community like she owned every blade of grass. I marched up to the gate, my heart pounding in disbelief, and shouted, "Karen, what on earth is going on here?" She turned to me with a smug, dismissive smile, as if I were interrupting an exclusive club event. "Oh, come on, it's just a little birthday party," she replied in a tone that dripped with condescension. "You never let anyone use the space anyway." Now, anyone who knows me understands that I have always been a firm believer in respecting property lines and maintaining peace on my land. But when Karen started pointing out how my property was supposedly an eyesore and insisted that her vision of community aesthetics should prevail over legal property rights, my patience began to wear thin. I explained that the land where the picnic was set up was not a community park, it was my private pasture, strategically located over a fragile underground water line that not only nurtured my crops but also fed into the local aquifer. "This isn't a playground, Karen," I said, trying to keep my cool. "Your guests are risking contamination and damaging infrastructure by driving trucks over it and setting up near sensitive utilities." But Karen waved off my concerns with a laugh, insisting that it was all in the name of community spirit. She even went so far as to offer free soda from a cooler and dismissed my worries as petty. That's when I knew I had to act, and not in the way anyone expected. I had a secret up my sleeve, a legal ace that could turn this farce on its head. I calmly excused myself, walked back to my house, and retrieved the remote control for the secure enclosure where my two wolves resided. In my mind, this was not an act of anger but a demonstration of boundaries enforced by law and nature itself. With a deliberate, measured whistle, I signaled the release of the wolves, ensuring they were securely corralled yet visible enough to send a clear message. As the wolves trotted out, their sleek coats glistening in the morning sun, a hush fell over the picnic. The wolves moved with an air of dignified authority, their eyes calmly assessing the scene. For a moment, time seemed to slow down. One of the wolves paused near a table laden with food, its gaze locking onto Karen, who was now frozen in place, her confident facade replaced by sheer terror. In that surreal instant, the entire gathering erupted in chaos. Guests started scattering, chairs clattered to the ground, and someone even dropped a tray of deviled eggs in their frantic escape. I stood there, not with malice but with a calm sense of righteous duty. I knew every step I had taken was by the book. Later, as the dust settled and the last of Karen's cronies fled the scene, I received a flurry of calls from local authorities and wildlife inspectors who had been alerted by the commotion. I invited them over, confidently explaining every detail: how my permits were in order, how the breeding program was legal, and how every measure had been taken to ensure safety. The inspectors were impressed by the meticulous documentation I had prepared, and they even commended my proactive approach to land management. But Karen was far from finished. The very next day, as I sipped my coffee on the porch, a drone buzzed ominously over the property, its camera fixed on my land. I could almost hear Karen's voice in my head orchestrating yet another scheme from behind her tinted windows. I had already filed one FAA complaint for her previous drone stunt, and this latest act only reinforced her determination to meddle in affairs that weren't hers to control. This wasn't just about a picnic anymore, it was about a battle of wills between a stubborn HOA enforcer and a man who valued his independence and legal rights. Over the next week, Karen's antics escalated into a full-blown campaign of harassment. She began organizing informal neighborhood meetings where she lectured parents on the dangers of my property, complete with maps that highlighted my land as a so-called hazard zone. Flyers appeared on telephone poles warning residents to keep a safe distance from my land, and even local news segments began to pick up on the drama. The community was divided, some were alarmed by Karen's claims, while others found humor in the absurdity of it all. I maintained my cool, however, collecting every email, every letter, and every leaflet as evidence of her overreach. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I received an official-looking envelope from the HOA's lawyer. The letter inside was a barrage of legal threats, accusations of environmental endangerment, claims that I was operating an exotic animal business, and even insinuations of psychological harassment of the community. The letter was laced with bullet points and legal jargon, attempting to paint me as a menace to public safety. I couldn't help but chuckle as I read it. Karen's imaginative interpretation of the law was almost as wild as her schemes. I immediately contacted my own attorney, a formidable woman named Janine, whose reputation for tenacity and legal brilliance was known throughout the county. Janine reviewed every document, every permit, and every piece of evidence I had amassed over the past few months. With calm precision, she drafted a detailed response, citing state wildlife laws, municipal regulations, and even federal statutes that clearly exonerated me from all of Karen's baseless claims. Her reply was not only a legal masterpiece but also a public relations coup that quickly turned the narrative in my favor. The turning point came when local media, sensing a compelling human interest story, invited me for an interview. In that interview, I explained everything: the history of my land, the intricacies of the wolf breeding program, and the series of provocations led by Karen. The reporter's sympathetic tone and my well-documented case resonated with viewers. Soon, letters and emails flooded in from residents who were tired of the petty power plays of the HOA and supportive of my right to manage my property as I saw fit. In a twist of irony, the very community that Karen claimed to protect began rallying behind me. As days turned into weeks, the situation slowly de-escalated. Karen's threats became less frequent as she found herself increasingly isolated even within her own HOA board. Members of the board, now emboldened by the overwhelming public support for legal rights and property autonomy, began to question her leadership. In one of the final acts of this dramatic saga, the board convened a meeting where Karen's continuous harassment and unfounded allegations were laid bare. With mounting evidence and a calm yet persuasive presentation by Janine, the board was forced to accept that my property was not only within my legal rights but also an asset to the community as a symbol of independence and proper land stewardship. There was one last twist that evening, a final visit from a uniformed officer who arrived at my door with a clipboard in hand. He gave my property a thorough inspection, speaking with a quiet respect that only those who had seen the truth could muster. "Your land is in full compliance," he said, nodding as he glanced over the wolf enclosure and the neatly maintained fields. "However, keep an eye out. There's word that Karen might be planning something else." That cryptic remark sent a shiver down my spine, not out of fear, but as a reminder that sometimes the battle for one's rights is an ongoing process. In the weeks that followed, Karen's attempts to destabilize my operations dwindled. The final blow came when the HOA board officially accepted my detailed documentation, effectively shutting down any future interference from Karen. Her resignation from the board was met with quiet relief and even a few discreet cheers from residents who had grown weary of her overzealous antics. With the legal battles behind me, I could finally return to the serenity of my land. Today, as I walk along the fence line and watch my wolves roam freely within their secure enclosure, I am reminded of the day when a misguided picnic turned into an unforgettable showdown, a day when nature, law, and perseverance triumphed over entitlement and chaos. My story is not just about defending my property, it's about standing up for one's rights with integrity, about knowing that when you play by the rules, even the most audacious challenges can be met head-on. And so, every time I hear the distant echo of a party or see a drone buzzing overhead, I smile quietly, knowing that justice, much like the wolves at my gate, never fails to show its true colors. And that, my friends, is the story of how an HOA picnic, a stubborn neighbor, and a legally sanctioned pair of wolves turned a potential disaster into a triumph of perseverance, legality, and a little bit of wild, untamed spirit. Whether you're fighting for your rights or simply enjoying the calm of nature, remember, sometimes the most unlikely defenders come in four-legged packages. Thank you for joining me on this wild ride of a story, and I hope you enjoyed every twist and turn as much as I did living it. Until next time, stay true to yourself and never let anyone bully you out of your own home.